Okay, so you want to own a ranch. Not the postcard version. Not the fence post at sunset version. The actual asset. The one that shows up on a balance sheet, gets financed at a bank, and either makes money or bleeds, depending on decisions almost nobody outside the industry understands. Here's what makes ranches strange as a business. The operation can lose money every single year, and the owner can still get richer. Or the operation can turn a real profit, cattle prices at record highs, everything on paper working, and the owner can still be one drought away from selling out to the neighbor who's been circling for a decade. Those two things happening at once on the same piece of dirt is the entire story. Most people who talk about ranches only ever tell you one half of it, the romantic half or the spreadsheet half. Neither half alone explains why billionaires keep buying more of this land while the family next door is quietly going under. By the end of this video, you'll understand both halves and why they don't cancel each other out. They're actually the same mechanism, viewed from two different bank accounts. First, the number nobody agrees on, what a ranch actually costs. Ask 3 people and you'll get 3 different answers, because ranch isn't a defined unit of anything. It's not like buying an apartment building, where you can price it per door. A ranch is priced per acre, and the range on that number is almost insulting. In the Wyoming and Colorado high plains, productive grazing land runs somewhere between $1,500 and $4,500 an acre. Out in the far reaches of West Texas, it can drop under $700. Get anywhere near a mountain corridor, Boulder, Fort Collins, the edges of the Front Range, and that same category of dirt jumps past $60,000 an acre. Same grass, same fence line practically, 100-fold difference because you're no longer buying grass. You're buying proximity. Here's the part that actually matters for anyone thinking about this as a business rather than a hobby. A cow-calf operation, the standard, working model, needs real scale to sustain itself. Analysts put the floor at around 500 acres for a self-sufficient herd. At the cheap end of the market, that's roughly $750,000 just to acquire the ground before a single cow, a single fence post, or a single water trough exists on it. And the ground is the cheap part. Add fencing, water systems, barns, and handling facilities. That's another $50,000 to $200,000, depending on what's already standing. Add equipment, tractors, trailers, the basics, another $50,000 to $100,000. Then the herd itself. A single cow runs $800 to $2,000 depending on breed and quality, and you're not buying one. Total entry point for a modest, medium-sized working cattle operation. Somewhere around $650,000 to $1 million on top of the land. And that's the floor. That's the version with no house, no guest lodge, no view. The cheap land is cheap for a reason. It forces you to spend more on everything else, trucking cattle further, hauling water further, driving further just to check a fence line. The expensive land isn't really selling you grass at all. It's selling you the thing grass can't buy on its own, access. And access is the first hint of something that runs through this entire business. The price tag on a ranch has almost nothing to do with what the ranch produces. Second, what happens once you actually own the thing and start running cattle on it? This is where the romance dies fastest, because the operating economics of a cow-calf ranch are some of the tightest in American agriculture. Full stop. Here's the mechanism. You keep a herd of breeding cows. Each cow, if everything goes right, produces 1 calf a year. You wean that calf, sell it into the market, and that sale is your revenue for the year for that cow. Cost of keeping her fed, watered, vaccinated, and alive for those 12 months comes out before you see $1 of profit. 2025 gave the industry a genuinely strange year, the kind analysts don't see more than once a decade. It has never been more expensive to keep a cow, and it has also rarely been more profitable to sell her calf. Both records were broken in the same 12 months. Average calf revenue hit $2,246, an all-time high, driven by a national cattle herd that's been shrinking for years, which made every calf that did exist worth more. Meanwhile, the average cost of carrying a cow for that year, feed, pasture, hired labor, also hit a record, $780 per head. Feed and hay alone eat up a third of that. Pasture eats another third. Net that out, and the best-run operations in the country cleared somewhere around $1,726 per cow. The weaker operations, same market, same record prices, cleared closer to $1,001. And across the wider industry, the range gets brutal fast. Some operations are netting $50 to $100 a cow. Others, run by the same weather and the same market, are clearing $600 to $800. That gap, $700 or more, between two ranchers selling into the exact same market, isn't luck. It's management. It's weaning weight, pregnancy rate, how tight the operation runs. Which means the ranch business rewards precision in a way most people don't expect from an industry that looks, from the highway, like it's just cows standing in a field. Now stretch that same math across a bad year, a drought year, a year calf prices soften, a year hay costs spike because the rain didn't come. The same operation that cleared $800 a cow can cross into negative territory without changing a single thing about how it's run. The rancher didn't get worse at the job. The sky did. That's the trap. You can run the tightest operation in the county and still be structurally exposed to a single variable you have zero control over. Third, and this is the piece almost nobody outside the industry accounts for, water. Set up stakes. If you take one number away from this video, take this one, because it's the number that actually determines whether a ranch is a business or a liability. Land without water rights isn't ranch land. It's a fenced-in desert. Anyway, before segment 4, if you're the kind of person who wants the mechanics behind businesses most people never look underneath, that's this whole channel. Subscribe, and the next one lands in your feed automatically. So, water. In the American West, water isn't attached to the land the way most people assume. It's a separate legal right allocated under a system that in many states still runs on first in time, first in right, meaning whoever claimed that water first, sometimes over a century ago, holds priority over everyone downstream, regardless of who owns the land today. You can buy 10,000 acres and inherit a water right that's junior to your neighbors, which means in a dry year, your cattle drink last. This is why the price per acre spread you saw in segment 1 isn't really about soil quality or grass density. It's a water proxy. Land near a river, an aquifer, or a senior water right commands a premium that has nothing to do with what will grow on it this season and everything to do with what's guaranteed to grow on it in 20 years, drought or not. It also explains something that looks irrational from the outside, why sophisticated buyers will pay what looks like an absurd premium for a smaller, well-watered parcel over a much larger dry one. The math isn't acres. The math is carrying capacity. How many cow-calf pairs the land can actually sustain through the driest year on record, not the average one. The land isn't the asset. The water underneath it is. The land is just the delivery mechanism. Fourth, and here's where the ranch economy stops looking like a normal business entirely. You just watch an operation clear, in a genuinely historic year, somewhere between $50 and $1,700 per cow. Even at the high end, on a modest 300-head herd, that's a few $100,000 against $1 million plus asset in the best year the industry has recorded in over a decade. That's a return that would get a business school student laughed out of the room. 2 to 4% net margins are typical for a cow-calf operation in a normal year, and normal years don't come with record calf prices. So why does the smart money keep buying ranches? Because the operation was never the return. The land is. U.S. farmland values have climbed at an average annual rate of close to 6% over the past several years, outpacing inflation even after you strip it out. Ranchland, specifically in parts of the Great Plains, posted an 11% jump in a single year recently, the kind of number that makes the cattle operation running on top of it look almost incidental. Here's the reframe. The cow-calf business isn't the product. It's the maintenance fee. Running cattle on a land, even at thin, sometimes negative margins, keeps the property classified as agricultural, which unlocks a property tax valuation that can run a fraction of what the same acreage would be taxed at if it sat idle or got developed. In some states, that difference is the gap between a 5-figure annual tax bill and a 5-figure fraction of one, which means the operating business, the part that looks like the whole point, the cattle, the calving season, the market timing, functions for a certain class of owner as a very expensive, very picturesque way of avoiding a much larger cost. You're not trying to make the ranch profitable. You're trying to make the appreciation tax efficient while the land does the actual work of building wealth in the background. The romance of the ranch is real. The economics of the ranch are almost never where the romance says they are. Fifth, which brings up the obvious question. If the operating margins are this thin, why do some of the wealthiest people in the country keep buying more ranch land than anyone could ever need? Look at who's actually been accumulating it. Ted Turner spent nearly 4 decades building one of the largest private landholdings in American history. More than 2 million acres across 6 states by the time of his death earlier this year. alongside the largest private bison herd on the planet at around 45,000 head. Turner wasn't chasing cow-calf margins. In his own words, part of the goal was making sure the land could never be developed. Conservation easements, legal agreements that permanently restrict how land can be used, became central to how he held it, and those easements come with a real financial mechanic attached. Donate the development rights, and the IRS lets you deduct the value of what you gave up. John Malone, the cable executive who built Liberty Media, took a similar path. Roughly 2.2 million acres across Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Florida, much of it placed under the same kind of permanent conservation restriction, funded in part through his own family land preservation foundation. And in late 2025, Stan Kroenke, owner of the Los Angeles Rams, closed the single largest private land purchase in the United States in more than a decade. Roughly 937,000 deeded acres in New Mexico, bought from the heirs of a Teledyne founder who'd held it since the 1960s. That one purchase pushed Kroenke's total holdings past 2.7 million acres and into the #1 spot on the country's largest landowner rankings, ahead of Malone, ahead of the Emerson timber family, ahead of everyone. None of these men needed the cattle income. That's the tell. When the operating business isn't the reason you're buying, the operating business stops being judged on operating terms. For a rancher running 300 head and financing the operation on a bank loan, a 2% margin in a good year is the difference between keeping the place and losing it. For a billionaire holding 2 million acres outright, that same 2% margin is a rounding error attached to a tax deduction, sitting on top of an asset appreciating at 3 times that rate every single year. Same land, same cattle, same weather, completely different business. Sixth, put all 5 pieces together, and the real shape of this business finally comes into focus. A ranch is priced by proximity, not productivity. It's operated on some of the thinnest margins in American agriculture, margins that swing from historic profit to real loss based on a single season of rainfall. Its true value sits in a water right that may or may not come attached to the deed. Its return is almost never generated by the operation sitting on top of it. The land does that work quietly in the background, while the cattle business justifies a tax classification. And at the very top of the market, the people accumulating the most of it were never trying to run a cattle business at all. Here's the part that reframes everything you just heard. The failure mode and the success mode of ranch ownership look almost identical from a highway. Cattle in a field, a truck kicking up dust, a gate that needs fixing. You cannot tell, by looking, whether the person who owns that land is one drought away from losing it, or 20 years into compounding a fortune they'll never need the cattle checks to fund. The ranch isn't really a business you buy into. It's a balance sheet wearing a business as a disguise, and whether that disguise makes you money or costs you everything depends entirely on which side of the water, right, you're standing on. Here's the thing about a ranch, though. For all its scale, it's still a business tied to weather, to grass, to a market that moves with the rain. There's another asset class that solves that problem entirely. One where the land is worth almost nothing for what grows on it, and everything for who's legally allowed to land a plane on it. Where a handful of gates and a parking structure can out-earn the runways they sit beside. That's the economics of owning an airport. And it starts with a number that sounds impossible until you